Well, like I said, thanks for being here. It's cool to connect with different people across, well, all over the world. I assume you're in Canada.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
in Vancouver, BC. Thank you for having me. It's
Yeah, of
it's
course.
very exciting and I'm a little bit nervous, but let's do
It's
it.
normal. I remember the first time I did a podcast and I wanted it to be perfect and I wanted to control everything. And then
Yeah,
the more you do it, the more it becomes just like a conversation between colleagues or between
for sure.
friends or between somebody, with different viewpoints, maybe sometimes even, and that's what makes it interesting. So no need to
Hmm.
be nervous. So you're from Vancouver, and I think from the emails that we sent back and forth, you're going to CS&N currently, or you've already graduated?
No, I'm actually going to Edison Institute
Okay.
and I'm halfway through my program
Okay. So Edison uses the optimal nutrition for the
for
mind
the
book.
mind.
Amazing. I told you in the email that that was one of my favorite books too when I was
Yes.
going to school. And I read every book that was part of the curriculum from back, like front to back. And I know
Yeah.
that some students don't. Uh,
Yeah.
like I'm sure there's some that are just for you too that were or are very dry,
Yeah.
and hard to kind of go through. What was it that like stuck out to you about that book that like really got you, I guess, like revved up or excited?
Yeah, honestly, it was really how connected our mental health is to our nutrition, to what we eat. I
Mm,
had an idea, but I didn't know this book would transform my life so much, to be honest with you,
mm.
to the extent that I'm exploring counseling, becoming a counselor
Amazing.
after I graduate with my nutrition program.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I remember it being really profound for me too, not so much because I struggled mentally myself, but I could really see the connection between what we ate and how we behaved and how that affected our mental health and our mental well-being and just I want to say even just like the way that you feel in your
Yes.
body even, which is
Yes.
really really cool. What's your experience? I don't know, often I find that students or people in the field get into their niche based on their own experience, with the thing that they've gone into business
Yeah.
for actually. Is
Yeah.
that true for you? Like, would you say mental health was kind of something that you struggled with and maybe that, hit home a little bit closer for you?
Well, yeah, and I've always known that keeping your glycemic, load lower with the foods you eat and, try not to have refined carbs, especially without fiber or protein, were not ideal. I always had an idea of those things, but I didn't know the biological, scientific explanation to all of this. And yes, when it comes to mental health, I have ADHD and
Okay.
I've been prescribed ADHD medication, which I've never been interested in taking, to be honest with you,
Hmm.
especially because of the book. It gives you options that you can try without having to take any psychotropics. So that definitely hit home. But
Mm.
I would say mental health in general has been something I've been pretty aware of and connected with. I come from a country where therapy and counseling is very common and vast, and most people do. I'm from South America. I'm from
Yeah.
Brazil, actually. And I had been, hearing about people going to therapy, and I've been myself to therapy since I was really young. So mental health was never a taboo topic. I know things are changing now,
Mm.
but it's always been part of my upbringing, emotional intelligence, your psychological well-being.
Mm.
So connecting nutrition to that, like I said, it was mind-blowing.
Mm. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Um, what does emotional intelligence mean to you?
I would say a lot of it has to do with awareness
Mm.
of where your emotions come from, and just being able to navigate through what you're feeling and make sense of it in a way.
Mhm, mhm. I heard a really cool way of kind of describing emotional intelligence the other day, and it was, well, there's a couple things that I really like.
Mhm.
One is when you look at certain words in English, even or in other languages, what they truly mean. So, like responsibility, for example, like we always think that it's our responsibility, it's something we have to take on, but
Yeah,
it's, for me, it's more our ability to
to respond.
respond
Yeah.
to a situation, right? And so, the person that I was saying said this something along the lines of emotional intelligence is your ability to navigate even when you feel angry or feel
Yes,
emotional or feel upset about something, to be able to check in with yourself
exactly.
and be in control. And I thought it was really interesting way of
Yeah.
framing it. Um so what do you think is missing, because you have, what I really like is, well, people living in a country that maybe isn't their own. So I'm currently living in Switzerland, and the
Hmm.
culture here is very different from Canada, obviously. And so I really like to get people's perspective, because you said it, emotional intelligence or therapy is taboo. And I definitely think it is in like in Canada for sure, within
Hmm.
our, let's say, Western culture. What do you think is missing, from our culture that is causing so many issues with mental well-being right now?
Hmm. I would say um, people that are open with their mental health, they have just the same issues, they just have more resources.
Mm,
And I remember that even the book talks about that, how in developing countries, it's easier for people with mental health to recover faster
mm,
because of the support system. So I would say it's honestly about being open, vulnerable, just being okay with needing connection.
mm,
I would say that that's what's missing between all of us in North America. And it's even for me, I've been here for 11 years, and sometimes I notice that even myself, I could do a better job at just being more open with my own feelings. That's why I really stay on top of of
mm.
all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean,
Hmm.
I think I'm just starting, now to kind of, with everything that I know, I mean, like I've learned a lot, I've experienced a lot, but with everything I know, it's just now that I'm starting to actually be able to fully feel like I can navigate my emotions 100%, or
Yeah.
navigate, even past things that have happened to me, and really kind of like let them go. And part of that is, I think, the connection to who my true self is, but also connecting to other people.
Yeah.
What do you see being like the biggest differences between, like, let's say, like Brazil and South America, in terms of the ability to connect from person to person, or the ability to share, that is different from, like, say, the North American kind of way we connect with people?
Yeah, I try to figure out how it can be so different, how the culture can be so different, because when I go down there, it's like a different planet, people hug you longer, tighter, people are more
Mm,
expressive with their emotions. Even if you watch like shows or movies from Brazil or South America or any Latin uh, country, you can tell it's different. And to be honest, I don't know exactly what it is. Um, I've heard theories that countries that are warmer, people are also warmer. I'm sure there's an aspect of the culture that you grew up in as well. We're more open with our expressions, and there's a lot of lively music. So I don't know if it's historical, it could also be that. But I wanted to say, with your previous comment of how you're becoming more aware of your own emotions and all of that, I feel like even within this field, we kind of have like we're kind of pushed to do it regardless. When you look at a person holistically, there's more to it than just the symptoms your body shows, you physically show, right?
mm,
That's where Western medicine, I feel like it's lacking,
Mm,
where there's a lot of, band-aids being put on people. The same way I told you, I was diagnosed with very mild ADHD, and I was prescribed medication for it. And so, but where is it coming from? What other, options do I have? Because I do think that pretty much everything that our body shows is connected to how we're feeling. And
mhm,
even going from, because I go to a naturopath as well as a, like a Western doctor, I go to both. And the questions that the naturopath asked me, no doctors have asked me. And due to that, I was able to uncover a lot more when it comes to my health history and my health situations,
mhm,
because they ask you more questions. They try to actually find out who you are holistically as a whole being, right? So
mhm.
I think that's also, I would say, that's missing. I know, I kind of deviated, but it's kind of related in a way, because it's we're missing that awareness. I would say that even in Brazil, people are more like, oh, your blood results came this way, were you more stressed? So even when it comes to your health, people are more aware of their emotions, I would say, than here.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting when you start looking at people and being able to tell where they're holding things or where um because that's kind of where the point, like at the point where I am now, is like I can tell by the way somebody sits, by the way that they
Yeah.
express themselves, by the way that they're holding their body,
Yeah.
what they need to work on, and maybe even, what some of their issues might be.
Yeah.
um and I think, my son, actually, my oldest son, his dad is from Latin America, and I grew up obviously with his mom, um, my son's grandmother, around a lot. And I think there's just like a lot more fluidity in the way that, well, I think in the culture, there's dancing,
Yeah.
there's movement, there's music, there's, like you said, a warmth that's there, and
Yes.
the connection that they definitely don't shy away from. That doesn't mean like if you cross a Latin person, then you're probably out for good. But
Yes.
if you don't mess up in the first place, you're probably okay. you know
For sure.
but you guys are some fiery freaking
I
people.
know.
And I love it, but it's this ability to still feel really open about it, I guess, and just
Yes.
be okay. And I think Western culture, like, yes, I know, like, cowboys down in like the south of the US and stuff, there's
Mhm.
lots of dancing and things like that, but I feel like we just don't dance and we just don't move, and the
Yeah.
emotions just sit in the body and stay trapped.
Yes, I was going to say art is a big part of it. It's I don't know when I learned how to dance, but I feel like I was born with it pretty much. I know I
Mhm,
wasn't, but because it's so part of, your upbringing, it's very natural to us,
mm,
dancing and singing, whatever it is, art, just art in general is very, it's very encouraged,
mm.
and it's
Yeah,
part of life.
yeah, and everything's so colorful down there, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
like the closeness to nature, because that's what I really feel like people are missing now, is like that
Yeah.
connectivity to nature. And if
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people have traveled down to South America or Central America, I'm sure, but like everything's so vibrant and so
Yeah.
alive and so fresh, and like you're so close to nature. And I think that plays a huge role in, obviously the sun plays a huge role down there too,
Oh yeah.
obviously, like the
Big
light
time.
versus being up north. But I think there's so many things to be said for the environment that you're in, right?
For sure. I agree with you. And even, studying holistic nutrition now, there's some explanation to why nature could be a factor to it as well, because, discharging, would that be the word? The negative,
Mm,
energy and the negative violence. The specific words and description are missing right now, but you get what I'm saying, right? How they say we should walk barefoot on grass and all of
yeah,
that.
yeah. And that it's as I dive more and more into, obviously I have a very scientific lens, right? As most people in this field probably do, but I
Mhm.
also have a very I'm going to say it like more intuition about
Yeah.
things. And it's when you start to really connect with how you're feeling in your body and then what actually makes you feel better, it's almost like this little, it's anecdotal, but I've seen it happen with so many people. You get somebody outside with their bare feet on the ground or their hands in soil or something
Yes.
along those lines, and all of a sudden they feel really a lot better, more
Yes.
expressive, lighter.
Yes. More energized.
Exactly. I
Hmm.
don't know if you know this, but I'm sure you'll find this really interesting, is that soil actually gives off antidepressant kind of scent and smell from the microbes in it. So
I
it
didn't
actually,
know.
yeah, so it actually works like an antidepressant would in our brain.
Wow. I'm not that surprised, to be honest. We come from nature and it's where we go back to. So I'm not surprised. I didn't know, but that's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what I like, is like I like when science kind of marries
Yes.
into what we intuitively know already.
Yeah.
And that's the part for me that I feel people have kind of lost, is like,
Yeah.
how do you connect from this spot over to the other? Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
That's what holistic nutrition does.
right. It's funny because people always ask me like, well, what do you do? And it's, you know, I started out very typically, I would say, where, you're coaching and consulting and you're giving meal plans and you're
Yeah.
doing your assessments and things like that. And now it's more like an intuitive practice of trying to teach people how to not figure it out on their own, but guide them
Yes.
to that emotional well-being.
Yeah. And awareness, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so how do you manage your ADHD, with everything that you know now? Like, medications, I think, have a place and a time
Yeah.
sometimes. I'm going to say that. But I
Hmm.
think a lot of times that they are actually unnecessary and there's something else that needs to be addressed. What do you think about that? And yeah, what do you do for you?
Yeah, I agree. And when it comes to medication having a place for it, I just want to say quickly that I also have hypothyroidism.
Mm,
And for the longest time, I tried to manage without medication, and it got to the point that it wasn't feasible anymore. So
mm,
I'm actually now taking medication. It's a by naturopath said it's a bit more natural because it's desiccated thyroid,
right.
and it was a bit of work to get my family doctor to prescribe it, but I made it work.
Okay.
So I'm definitely managing the nutritional aspects of that, as well as taking the medication. But when it comes to ADHD, since we're talking about mental health, if you want, we can talk about the hypothyroidism treatment as well, because there's a few things that I stopped doing that have been helping when it
Mm,
comes to nutritional needs. But when it comes to ADHD, really, so a few things that we know is, and I even prepared a little document if we were to get
how
into that.
cute. I love it.
Things, there are things that are good for everyone, right? But especially if you have ADHD, which is my case, which is to keep your blood sugar leveled out.
Mm,
That really helps with the way that your brain produce hormones and how the brain functions altogether. Um, Essential fatty acids,
mhm.
huge one, huge one. If I were to take anything from this course and this book, would be honestly essential fatty acids. It's crazy how much it has changed my mental health, to be
Oh,
honest with
yeah.
you. It has helped me improve my concentration. It has helped me have developed better memory, to be honest with you. And I can really see when I don't take for a few days, or if I go on vacation and I'm not so on top of it, my memory just doesn't work the same way.
Mhm.
And we're not consuming as much as we should at all. B vitamins, is a really big one as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the typical, avoiding fried food and not smoking and exercising. Another one that a couple other ones that have been game changers for me would be L-tyrosine.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major one. I would say it's the not the equivalent, but it's the supplement that people that have ADHD and problems focusing, and um, it just enhances my ability to focus and accomplish tasks, since it works on the dopamine and adrenaline. And another one that I'll definitely say, it's not related to nutrition, but meditation, because
Mm.
it helps with just being present and always going back to that place of calmness and stability, when it comes to my mind. So that's a daily practice that I've adopted, and it's been a really big one as well.
Mm-hmm. I know for me, meditation is key. I have a very busy mind. I feel like my mind is constantly busy, but I feel like if I don't feel centered, I feel like I have to be busy in everything else that I'm doing, and I cannot sit down and I cannot relax.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been definitely a journey to kind of try and figure out what that balance is between rest,
Mm-hmm.
shutting off, and actually, like, what does rest actually mean to me, and where
Mm-hmm.
do I feel like I can actually get that? And yoga and meditation are two things that definitely are game changers,
Yeah.
100%. And it's funny because when I was in the program, like, we're told about obviously these tools that we can use, in order to help fix things, or, even rebalance a little bit. But I always kind of just looked to the nutrition part. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition that I kind of finally had time to just sit down and take care of myself. Um, and it forced me, like, it was finally like my body forcing me to take this step forward into, like, taking a look at mental health and
Yeah.
what actually got me into, in my opinion, the state that potentially contributed to the onset of my autoimmune condition. Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely things that we're born with that affect our mental health. And then there's things that we do, maybe societal things that we do, that push us kind of forward into different states within our body. Do you remember, as like a child or as a teenager, feeling like you were different, like you had HDD or HDD? It's getting late here in Switzerland. Bear with me, folks.
No problem.
ADHD. Do you feel like you felt it when you were younger and you just didn't know what it was? Like, how old were you when
Mm.
you were actually diagnosed?
I was diagnosed here, I think last year.
Okay.
I was really late into it. But I cannot tell you exactly when I developed it. I don't remember, but I do remember being at least, I would say, around 11, 12,
Mm,
and just having a really hard time with certain subjects in school. So it's funny because with ADHD, you do have problems. You can have a problem focusing, but if it's something that interests you, you hyper focus. And there
mm,
were subjects in school that I was the best at. They would come naturally: languages, arts, sociology, anything human related. I would be
mhm.
really good naturally. But when it comes to math, physics, honestly, just science in general, I was not good. And it's just funny because when you asked if I felt different, well, I did have to deal with trauma, like all of us, to an
Mm,
extent. um, and my parents separated around kind of that same time that I feel like my symptoms started to show. There wasn't a lot of awareness at that time. So you know school teachers or the principal would just say, just have to focus more. And it's not like I couldn't retrieve information, but it was really hard for me to pay attention to certain things that I didn't find to be the most interesting. And there's a lot of research in the psychological field, because I do look into this a lot, how ADHD is a way to cope with trauma. So I'm not surprised. I'm glad that there's more awareness now and we're talking about it. That's why I'm an advocate for it. I do believe in, the more we talk about, the more awareness that will be, and we just need to find ways to cope with it. If medication it is to an extent, so it will be, it should be that, but we should also talk about other ways to cope with it, such as diet and therapy, and just more awareness in the schools. It's just, I look back now and I remember people telling me, like, you just have to focus, you just have to try, you just have to try harder. And when I had one-on-one meetings, like, what is the word in English for it, when you're getting extra help from like a teacher
Yeah,
one-on-one?
it's like the
Private,
outside, the
yeah, like
class. Yeah.
private tutoring kind of.
Yeah.
I learned a lot easier, and I would ace the tests, but I feel like there has to be resources, so we can cope with it in other ways, especially children, as opposed to just giving them, Ritalin or Adderall. There are other things we can do.
Hmm. Do you think that it's also based on personality and who you are as a human, and that the school system or the way that our educational system is set up, that we are expected to fit into a certain criteria and a certain box, and that it's too linear? Like, there's no room for that fluidity and that movement that we were talking about. Do you think that's true for the education system?
Yes, I definitely think so. And I don't have the answer. I don't know, how much work it would be to create, different class styles and learning styles for different children with different needs. I don't know what the answer would be to that, but I definitely felt like I had to fit into a box for the longest time.
Hmm. It's it's funny because when I was in school, I had a really hard time not focusing. Like, I could be focused, but I just found that I learned in such a different way that I
Hmm.
would not pay attention to what the teacher was doing and just actually read and then complete the homework within the class that I was in. And so I
Wow.
always felt like I was like ahead of everything. And so sitting down for me was really difficult because I already felt like I was integrating the information much faster than it was
Yeah.
arriving to me. And so I ended up like homeschooling myself. There was
Oh,
good
wow.
programs at the time, but having the ability to be at home and be able to work on my own and not have to stick to a schedule really helped me. And I think that made me appreciate um well, how rigid, I'm going to say it like that, appreciate how rigid the school system is.
Hmm.
And my son, actually, the youngest son, obviously, I believe that the majority of even our mental health starts in our gut, right?
Hmm.
And I think I was already having autoimmune conditions when I got pregnant with him. And I was just starting my nutrition program when I got pregnant with him. And he ended up being born with like extreme colic and allergies, which luckily, as I was learning, I started to understand, what the connection between allergies and food sensitivities, and even he had eczema all over his chin and things. And so I knew
Wow.
there was some issues there in terms of food sensitivities and whatever. And we got tested, and he ended up being highly allergic to the majority of things that I ended up having food sensitivities towards.
Oh, really?
Which is really interesting because it's almost like my microbiome obviously passed on to him, and what was kind of a subtle thing in me became a very pronounced thing in him. And my husband and I, he's always had a hard time with having too much energy and focusing. And we've always said that if we didn't know what we know about nutrition and what we know about how to balance his emotions and also his overall mental state and
Mm-hmm.
ability to, what's the word I'm looking for? To stay balanced within, like, it's otherwise we have emotions like up and down, and it's
Yeah.
like two different children almost, like, and you can see it almost in immediately speaking. And so if we always said, like, if we didn't know what we knew or what we know now, he definitely would have been put on some kind of medication by now, and even now the schools here have told us, he needs to see a psychologist, he needs to do
Mm-hmm.
this. And so we've taken him and they all say he's fine. It's just really related to food.
Yeah.
It's very crazy, the connection that you can see and how fast you can see it in children like that. Do you have food sensitivities yourself? Um,
Yeah, well, I am sure I'm allergic to gluten. I'm not celiac, but I do think I have at least an intolerance. And as well as dairy. I don't have anything like it's not diagnosed. This is just for my own symptoms and the way I feel. The only thing I know for sure that I have allergies to is um it's a specific type of mushroom. It's a very chubby one. It's a kind of shiitake. It's not a regular shiitake. That's one of the things I know. I grew up having hay fever a lot. So
mm,
seasonal allergies, ear infections, which is a sign of dairy uh, intolerance. So I grew up going to the doctor to get that fixed. But I do know that the connection between allergies and mental health, autism, schizophrenia, and even learning, disabilities is huge. It's really the way that your brain receives the protein, the antibody in you, and it reacts in this way. So I think we should all be more in tune with our bodies, and and see it's that's why they say these I don't know to what extent these food tests work,
mm.
because what you're allergic to in your gut you might not be allergic to on your skin, and vice versa. So I really feel like it's a matter of us just testing things out. That I would say that could be the most efficient way, or maybe
I
not efficient way, but the most for sure way, right? The
The
most
most
certain way.
accurate, yeah, the
Yes.
most, well, let's say relevant to you, let's
Yes.
say. Um, and I definitely agree with you. Like, what bothers my son, let's say food sensitivity wise or emotionally, like what we see as being a connection, definitely sugar, too many grains, right? Like, you can have
Mm-hmm.
wheat maybe once a week,
Yeah.
and I buy it from a local organic farm and it's an ancient grain wheat, and it's not, and he can and he does really well now kind of handling even, just organic wheat versus, but before it
Right.
was absolutely impossible to feed him those things, right? And so
Yeah.
we've literally spent 8.5 years trying to build up his gut health in order to be able to have him, well, more so that if it happens accidentally, it's
Yeah.
not a disaster. And having him recognize too, like, a big thing was like, we're going to allow you to have this, but we want you to recognize how you feel after you eat it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that was really a huge part of it.
Is he in a better place now? Is he aware of his needs and how his body will
100%.
function?
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes he obviously, as a child, it gets kind of tied in with like an emotional aspect. Obviously, like all of us, food is a very
Yeah.
emotional thing, and he feels sad sometimes that he can't eat things. So
Yeah.
we always are looking for like an alternative that he's happy with. Like if somebody's eating a big, yummy piece of chocolate cake and he's allergic to something in it, or he knows it's probably not the best thing for him, is there an alternative that he can have that he's happy having?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and obviously, as he's gotten older, it's gotten a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a 3 or 4 year old who's not the best at communicating, maybe not the most present in their
Right.
body, it's really hard for them to communicate what's happening.
Yeah.
So we just try and be aware of it too. Like if all of a sudden his behavior goes from being nice and calm and collected and logical to just
Yeah.
outrageous, we ask him like, how are you feeling right now? Like,
Yeah.
and was there anything that you ate? Is this a purely emotional thing, or was there something that maybe you think that could have
Mm-hmm.
set this off? It's
Oh,
cool.
that's really good. So
Yeah,
he's
it's
more aware of his symptoms, and then as he gets older, he develops that sense of, oh, I'm feeling this way. It's not fun.
mhm.
It's coming from this or it's coming from that. It's either food or, some emotional place that I know I can work with. That's awesome.
It's really fun, and it's back to that like emotional intelligence thing that we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about before. Is
Yes.
like I think your ability to respond to it, if you recognize that your body's like kind of throwing you into a response versus you wanting to get there on your
Yeah.
own terms, it's very interesting. Um, what do you think about vegan diet? Be honest, because it's a safe place.
Yes. Well, it's because it's a controversial topic for myself. I am pescatarian
Okay.
and I go back and forth all the time, all the time. So I I honestly will not have a definite answer. I feel like for the rest of my life, I do have periods I go vegan. I find them hard. It's not the easiest thing to for me. I have a high need for protein. I exercise a lot. I'm very active and I do find it hard sometimes to meet my protein requirements without anything, animal derived. uh,
Mhm.
I've been pescatarian for 9 years, it's going to be now, and I have a good relationship with that. I'm aware of what I consume. According to a lot of the books that I read for school, pescatarian diet is one of the best diets, the Mediterranean diet, right? So I'm now at peace, being pescatarian. When I go away either to Brazil or just anywhere in general, I went to Mexico in December and they barely had vegetarian options
Mm.
that met my protein requirements, because I'm at a point that I've developed my self-awareness when it comes to my food. I can tell, and eating slowly and all of that, but I can tell when I've met my protein requirement or when I need more protein. I can tell when I'm satiated from protein or not, because it's protein that, mostly satiates us, as we know. And I can tell when I need not and when I need more or when I'm good. And I try the vegetarian options. I try when I go away and they don't fill me up. There's not enough, sustenance. So when I go to those places, I sometimes honestly have no option but to eat fish.
Mm.
And I am aware of the impacts of, the fish industry. That's why I consume in smaller amounts. But at this point, and I'm very, very environmentally friendly. I'm very concerned. I'm that person that recycles everything, that person that's aware of what I'm buying and packaging and all of that. So for me to, have to come to terms with this, it's because I feel like it's really what I need. In general, I would say I do think the meat industry is brutal. For example, in Brazil, there's a lot of states that have more, would say like cattle than humans.
Mm.
That's insane. I think that for the longest time we were not aware of this. There's a lot of people that are not, but I feel like if people choose to eat meat because their body needs, because of their culture needs and all of that, eat meat. I'm not gonna be one to sit here and be like, everyone should be vegan,
Mm.
But I think that just being aware of where it comes from, I feel like if everyone knew where it comes from, we would at least consume less. We would be more aware of what to buy, where to get it from, like where to get our meat from. Um, I would say awareness should be kind of mandatory, to be honest with you, if you're
Mm.
choosing to eat meat. And if you want to eat, if it makes you happy, if it meets your nutritional needs, if that's what you need, go for it. I would just ask people to just not pretend, that what you buy at the grocery store did not come from an actual animal.
Mm.
I do the same when it comes to fish, when it comes to eggs, when it comes to the dairy that I consume every once in a while. So like I said, I don't have a specific answer. It's very hard for me to decide. I feel like if I had a chef and if I had, um, endless amount of, like just full access to, the best vegan food and the best options, I would probably try. I'm not at that place in my life, and I'm at peace being in this place, and I don't
Amazing.
judge others. Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I would say.
that's good. That's um a very good way of putting it, is that I think once you start diving into personal nutrition, and I think that's really important, is that the reason I asked you that is that I find with labels that we're putting on things, keto diet, paleo diet,
Mhm.
carnivore diet, vegan, vegetarian.
Mhm.
And so we have all of these labels now that um, are supposed to be trying to like direct us into what way we should be eating, instead of us connecting back to nature, back to how things were supposed to be, um, in terms of what we're eating. Most people, there's a huge disconnect, like you said, about where the food comes from. Like, where does that piece of chicken that you're eating
Yeah.
come from? Can you happily say your farmer? Can you
Mhm.
happily see where the animals are being raised? And I think that's what's missing, is that
Mhm.
understanding of life cycles and where and
Mhm.
how they're actually put forward. For me, I tried veganism. I cannot do it. I have to have meat. I
Mhm.
think that's part of my genetic makeup.
Mhm.
Fish, I have, and like fatty fish, definitely, like salmon and steak really are like the two things I have to have.
Mhm.
And adding in organ meats too. It's just
Mhm.
what I need nutritionally. I
Yeah.
don't feel like I can absorb. And I think there's something to be said too, as to like what your heritage is, right? Like,
Mhm.
people down south tend to be able to digest carbohydrates more. There was an interesting study that I read the other day, actually, about how the sun affects the microbiome, and how people down south can eat more carbohydrate rich foods like bananas and pineapples and
Oh,
mangoes and rice and beans and things like that, because the microbiome has shifted. And so in the summer here, we can probably handle things that are higher in
yeah.
on the glycemic index, or
Yeah.
more carbohydrate rich foods, let's even say like natural, even fruit and stuff,
Yeah.
in the summer. But then seasonally, as the sun shifts and changes, our microbiome would shift and change with it. And so we have to literally eat with the season, whereas,
That's so interesting.
so fascinating, right?
And it makes sense because the tropical fruits, let's call it, the ones that have, more sugar, more fructose and all of that, they are from countries that are warmer. And
Hmm.
berries, like we don't have all these berries in Brazil, you know. I make
Hmm.
recipes with these berries. People are like, what are these?
Yeah.
Because they come from here. Oh, that's so interesting.
Well, and those are lower in glycemic load and
Yes.
everything, and better and easier, lots more fiber,
Yeah.
a really good like complement, like antioxidants
Mm-hmm.
to what people would eat. And if you look at what, indigenous people in Canada would have been eating, it would have been berries, and it would have been meat, and it would have
Yeah.
been fish. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because I think with the cycle of the sun, the body would need the vitamin D that's coming from the fish and
Mm-hmm.
from the organ meats and from the meat itself, it would be
Mm-hmm.
more satiating and easier for the microbiome of those people to actually digest it.
That's so interesting.
It's really fun to think about it like that. And I
Yeah.
feel like if I pay attention to, because we're up north more even in Switzerland,
Yeah.
if I pay attention to that, I feel better. Like I naturally gravitate toward like soups and squashes and
Yeah.
things that can be found here in the winter,
Yeah.
than I do, the tropical things. But then in the summer, like I want mango and I want
Yeah.
apple and I want
Exactly.
those things
That's
that.
so interesting. That's what I'm saying. It's the self-awareness that I feel like a lot of us are missing, because we try to force ourselves, right? Like if you go to the grocery store, you'll find mangoes right now in winter. Like, why are we doing this? Why don't we explore what we have locally? It's better for us, according to these studies that I believe in. It's better for the environment, since there's not, a lot of transportation. It's better for, like we even the nutrients will absorb from those fruits and vegetables. They will be better if they're from the climate that they're supposed to grow from, and if they're local, right?
Mm.
It's so cool.
It is. Yeah. And I don't think like a lot of people actually realize how far some things actually come, like a lot of stuff comes from China and Canada,
Mm-hmm.
garlic and things
Yes.
like that are imported. And if we want to be truly cognizant of how our food system works, we have to really dig into those things. And I
Yes.
think something that I've been trying to kind of push forward in the last few podcasts that I've done is, how nutritionists can act as leaders kind of in helping people um, figure that out, like how can we, instead of focusing on like, oh, I'm going to help you become vegan, or oh, I'm going to help you follow this
Mm-hmm.
keto diet, or here's a meal plan, or, diving down the rabbit hole of what could be physiologically wrong with you, but how can we take this step towards helping people understand the food system better and what is actually happening right now? Because there's some crazy
100%.
things,
Yes,
crazy,
I
crazy
agree.
things.
I agree with you. I agree with you. That's definitely something we can focus more on. Eating slower, reading the nutritional labels, finding out where things are coming from. Even with the meat example I gave, knowing where it comes from, so we're also aware of the hormones that are being put,
Mm.
into your meat, and why meat sometimes can be cheaper than vegetables. How is that possible? Like, why is that? We are what we eat, and our emotions they also show, what
Mhm.
we're eating and how we're feeding our bodies, and it's up to us to stay on top and just develop that awareness, you know.
Yeah. I have a saying, well, that's pretty common within, I think, our sphere. It's like it's not just what you eat, but you are what you absorb, right?
Yes.
So if you're eating shit food, you're absorbing shit, right? Like
Yes.
you're absorbing all those chemicals, and if your liver's not up to like snuff with it, it's staying in the body. And I don't think enough, these are the things that I think that we learn that are super cool in school,
Hmm.
but don't
Hmm.
actually get taught
Yes.
outside of our learning, really.
Yes.
Um, it's really cool. Is there anything else that you want to bring up or talk about, or even just, bounce ideas back and forth?
Hmm. Let me take a look here at my notes.
Yeah.
Just 1 second. I feel like at this point, even though we haven't talked directly about that, but most people with mental health problems, from depression to schizophrenia, they have a nutritional issue with them, or some nutritional deficiency underlying as a cause.
Hmm.
Um, there's some interesting fun facts.
Open, let's hear them.
Okay, let me just. find one here. Just one second. Well, we were talking about wheat allergies and just allergies in general. So there's a connection between wheat allergy, autism, and schizophrenia. And it's interesting that depression is a common symptom in people with a hidden food allergy. And I do think they go hand in hand, our emotional state with the nutritional aspect. But just being aware of that, it's a really cool thing. Another one I wrote down is how when we tend to forget things when we're stressed, and it's because stress increases the levels of cortisol, and cortisol damages your brain. So that's why we forget
Right.
things. I thought that was an interesting one.
Well, and it's really interesting. I'm just gonna put this in there because I didn't really think about it this way, but so for my autoimmune condition, chronic fatigue comes along with it quite often. And so one of the treatments that they tend to do is give antidepressants that kind of have an exciting the side effect of the antidepressant is to cause more excitement in the body, right? So I thought that was really interesting. But the other thing is too, is like when you have a flare with an autoimmune condition, you're given steroids, right?
Right.
Which is technically causing more stress within the body.
Yeah.
When I feel like a lot of the root cause of my autoimmune condition was stress already.
Yeah.
So it's like, here, I'm going to just stress the body a little bit more so it stays in this like hyper position and not actually kind of look back at what the root cause is. Anyways, I thought I'd just add that in there.
No, that's very interesting. And it reminds me of when I was talking to my naturopath about my hypothyroidism, and she asked, "Oh, your levels went up, very high, very fast. Are you going through a stressful time right now?" And I stopped to think, and I'm like, maybe, maybe there is something going on. But then I talked to my family doctor, and not to bash on my family doctor, but I brought up the stress factor, and I asked if that could have anything to do with the levels of my thyroid hormone, and right away she was like, no, it has nothing to do with that. So I'm not saying this to say there isn't a place for Western medicine at all. I do think there's a huge need, and there's a place. It's just when we start looking at things just from a broader perspective, because we are our own little world within each human being, how can we separate our emotions or psychological state from how diseases are showing in our body? It just amazes me how how we like. I really feel like I'm very passionate about this. We really have to find a way to connect both, and I think that's why we do what we do, right?
Right. I think the one thing I think is that people who get into this field, the reason we get into it is because we're very good at seeing patterns. We're very good at making a connection between something that we're experiencing and what made that shift. And obviously, I agree with you. I think, Western medicine has a place, especially for acute injuries and things like that. But to deny what other cultures, let's say, have known for thousands of years to be true, whether we're going back to, most Eastern religions or what they know and what even indigenous people over in, North America knew, and that there was people, in the community to help guide you through those body states, let's say, because they are an expression of who we are. And I think that that's what's missing, is that we've kind of tossed that aspect of human experience to the side and then replaced it with this almost mechanical view of medicine or well-being. Like if you go to a mechanic, you don't have to go to a mechanic for the engine, and then you don't have to go to a different mechanic for the tires, and a different mechanic to do body repairs. They can do all of it. And I think that it's kind of a good analogy to look at what we do in that kind of lens. It's like we can see the connection between what's happening on an emotional level, but then also on a physical level.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree.
Mm. Um, Anyways, did you have any more fun tidbits of fun facts?
I want to say one last one,
Yes.
if you allow me. We were talking about depression and autoimmune diseases, and I just found this interesting because I do find myself craving sweets
Mm,
when there's just clouds and dark skies every day over here in Vancouver and lots of rain, and our cravings towards sugary foods around when we're not when we're down or depressed, it actually has a biological reason. Um, so glucose helps carry tryptophan to the brain,
mm,
and tryptophan is what is the precursor to serotonin.
mm.
So I thought that one was very interesting.
That is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. I'm trying to just process that because I think it's yeah. Well, and then also like what kind of sugar, like it's glucose, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
because our brain uses glucose as the primary fuel, right? So
Right.
it's trying to make the brain produce more serotonin, aka feel happier. So
Yes,
we
yeah,
crave more
exactly.
more sweets. Isn't that cool?
Well, and I also like, I mean, I kind of think I like to think of everything as seasonal too, is like everything that we eat and everything that we feel is going to be seasonal, whether that's on a monthly basis. And I think each sex, male and female, kind of have a different cyclical kind of
Hmm.
being, right? We're
Yeah.
obviously on a very monthly schedule, or way of feeling, and our bodies kind of function that way. And I think we kind of miss the whole cycle of the year sometimes to really think
Yeah.
of like, do I feel sadder in winter? Why do I feel sadder in winter? What can I do to combat those
Hmm.
things? Does getting more sun, for example, in the summer to up your vitamin D levels, how does that play a role in your mental well-being in the winter? Are you able to regulate these emotions and these feelings a little bit better if you are aware of it for the whole year? And I feel like
Hmm.
winter is really a time for stocking, almost
Yes.
like holding and building. And um, it's interesting that our bodies naturally want that, especially in a darker country, where um, well, it's true too for animals, because we have rabbits, and the suggestion is they live outside on our balcony. um, but the suggestion is to feed them more during the winter, because
Right.
our bodies demand more energy in the winter to stay
Yeah.
warm and to do all of those things. So that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And maybe it's a time to just be more with ourselves and take time to process our emotions as well. I've seen a few videos on that. Um, Summer is so busy and we're out and about and absorbing the sunlight, and all of that.
Mhm.
So then I do like how there's different seasons here as opposed to like Brazil doesn't have different seasons. It's usually depending where you are, very warm. There are places that are colder in the south. There's not a lot of different seasons, and I like that about North America. I
Mm.
think there's an emotional place for it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love fall. I love winter. I like being
Mm-hmm.
cold. I like
Mm-hmm.
being cozy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I love the sun, but I'm not a huge sun person. I do
Mm-hmm.
like the sun. Like I like being in it, but it's got a limit to it. I
Yeah.
can't be in it all the time. Um, One last thing. So back to the nutritional deficiencies that you were mentioning. How do you think that we can kind of shine more of a light on figuring out what those nutritional
Mm-hmm.
deficiencies might be, and um, where does a person start?
Well, I would say when it comes to mental health, there are basic few things. Zinc is it's the most deficient mineral in our bodies and especially in the brain. Magnesium would be the second one. So if we're not supplementing with that, and like I said, essential fatty acids,
Mm.
we should really start with that, and B vitamins. Um, I would say, depending on the severity of your symptoms, talk to a nutritionist. If you're just starting, I would say, a broad spectrum vitamin, with all the vitamins and minerals, is a good place to start. That doesn't have enough essential fatty acids, and I keep going back to the essential fatty acids because they are essential. Our brain, if we desiccate, if we dry up our brain, 60% of it will be fat, and
Mm.
we need it from everything from hormone production to the way our brain cells communicate with each other. So it really affects everything in our bodies. It's so crucial. So I would say supplementing on that, and then, well, obviously, if you're vitamin D deficient, you need that on top of the multivitamin and mineral. But really, just um, we are all individual beings. We need different things. And that's why I'm saying, depending on what you're going through, it's best to talk to a professional. Some people can have, you know, very specific trace minerals deficiencies, and you don't know that unless you talk to someone who knows what the deficiencies could look like, and you trying to find that all out. If it's something very specific on your own, it could take a lot of time that I think most people don't have the time for. That's why I'm saying, just in general, um, paying attention to also what we need and how we feel after, so we can find out if there's an allergy or intolerance, because that can really have an impact in our overall well-being and mental health, especially. Um, so yeah, I would say these are the basic ones. Keeping your blood sugar leveled as well, which means, um, have if you're having something that's carb loaded, have with some protein, and or some fiber with it, so it slows down the digestion. It helps stabilize your blood sugars. That's a big one for your mental health as well. I would say these would be the general, recommendations, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like they're pretty bang on too. What do you think? This is my last question for you, I think. What do you think is causing these nutritional deficiencies?
Mm. I feel like there's a few different factors there. Number one, and this is not in a specific order of importance, but I would say the soil, the way we're treating the soil, is a huge, huge, huge one. The way we transport the food and how early it's picked, and how long it takes, and the method that it takes to get to our table. The way we make the food as well. But I would say pollution has a lot to do with it. I would say that we just in general have a higher need for nutrition than before. We're consuming, I believe, yeah, I wrote a quick note. The average person today eats 1/6 of the omega-3 fats found in the diet of people living in the 1850s, and we're currently the third or fourth generation with inadequate DHA intake, which is an essential fatty acid as well. So this can have a lot to do with our increasing rates for neurological and mental health problems.
Hmm.
So it is the food choices, but also food processing. So it's honestly a combination of things, I would say.
Bang on again. Like I 100% agree with you, like how we're growing food. So what I taught when I was working at CSNN in Vancouver was eco nutrition. So like how our food was grown uh even 100 years ago versus how it's growing now, and the deficiencies that we're seeing in soil health and whatnot, and even the, let's say, the death of the microbiome within the
Mhm.
soil and how we're growing our food, um, because the nutrients because the soil is dead, the nutrients cannot be pulled from the
Mhm.
soil
Mhm.
effectively, right? And
Mhm.
so I think we are sterilizing everything, right up from the soil all the way to our bodies, even, the products that we're using on our skin and everything. And we're disconnecting from the thing that we are actually from, like we're from the
Yes.
soil, we're from the earth, we come from there, we're highly connected to it, and we're becoming more and more sterile, just like the soil is, and that nutrient absorption is missing. And so
Mhm.
even like when you do get the chemical version of, the supplement or the nutrition, let's say the vitamin or mineral, are is our body capable of absorbing any of those nutrients effectively if our gut is disrupted and our
Mhm.
microbiome is disrupted all the same? So I definitely agree with you that it's a multi-level issue, and that's why being more aware of where our food comes from, like how it's grown, what is the farmer doing to
Mhm.
change those things. And that's where I'm at now, really, is I love nutrition, I love nutritional coaching, um but I feel like my mission now is more like on the growing a garden and growing your own food and
Yeah.
learning about how
Yeah.
to grow healthy food. And if more and more people start doing that, I think it'll have a huge benefit on our mental health issues.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to say thanks for being here. Where can people find you online?
So I'm working on my website and you can find me on Instagram. I'm also planning on being on TikTok soon. So I have my personal handle on Instagram, but I also have my nutritional one. So my nutritional one is at Nutrition by Anna, ANAR. My last name is Rodrigues. So I would say that would be the easiest way to find me.
Perfect. Um, well, thanks for being here today. And
Thank you so much, Lynn.
yeah, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.